Welcome to Growing Up B2B. I'm Delia, and I'm the second generation president of Delia Associates. We are the place where B2B brands go to grow. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Delia, and I'm the second generation leader of Delia Associates. We're a business branding and marketing firm, the place where B2B brands go to grow. I'm really excited about our guest today. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while now. We're here with Marc Gaelen. Marc is the CEO of O.Berk Company, and he's the fourth generation to lead the company, which is really exciting. To tell you a little bit about O.Berk, they're a leading supplier of custom and stock packaging solutions, serving a diverse range of consumer markets, products, and brands. Hey, Marc, so great to have you with us today. Thanks so much.
Ed, it's great to see you again. I always enjoy our conversations.
Same here. Okay, so we're talking about you, we're talking about O.Berk, and we're talking about the family business. Take me back to the beginning, Marc, if you would. What were some of your
Wow.
earliest memories of O.Berk Company as maybe a child or a young fellow?
Yeah, I was one of these kids. At the time when I was a kid, my dad actually worked 6 days a week because we didn't really have advanced computers and they did all the billing on Saturdays, to be quite honest. For a long time growing up, I really didn't know. I knew what we did, okay? We sold, when I started as a kid, largely stock packaging. When the
Hmm.
business started, it was glass bottles because that's all there were. Then things moved into plastic, metal, tubes, a whole bunch of other things as rigid packaging grew.
Hmm.
At the beginning, my memories were, boy, I give you a funny one. My dad used to have a Rambler. If you remember, that was it was a brand for car made by AMC. And his little
Okay.
old Rambler, I'd get in there, he'd drive me to school, and the back was full of plastic bottles. He had the back of thing full of samples. So I knew we had something to do with bottles and stuff, and I knew he'd sold them, but I didn't really get it. But getting in that car, boy, it was like he just threw everything in the back seat. It was like a little inventory thing here.
That's funny.
So as I got older, I used to go down and visit my dad. We used to be in Irvington, then we were in Newark. We're now in Union, New Jersey.
Hmm.
But in getting around, it was a small business,
Hmm.
and it had all the characteristics of a nice small family business, which is one of the things I'll mention to you that I think is a differentiator for us. We really try to keep the attitude of a family business as you grow.
Hmm.
So it began. So as I got older, I got to see what O.Berk was doing. And I guess the biggest change of when I got to learn something was in the early 70s when I was younger. My dad did an acquisition, did a first acquisition for our business.
Hmm.
And I would go down there every once in a while. I actually, in some summers, I worked in the warehouse, just
Sure.
kind of helping out. And we did what I like to say is what we do now in terms of supply chain and sales is exactly what we did when I started like 40 years ago, but it's not. By that, I just mean we still do what we did then, but we've had to adapt to the changing market and the whole range of rigid packaging has changed dramatically over the years.
Hmm.
We've added a whole bunch of new markets, uh, new creative things, doing a lot of more custom stuff now because the it's easier to do. Back when I
Hmm.
started, custom was very expensive.
Sure.
When I started, there was no PET. So it
Yeah.
was largely HDP.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different world.
That makes sense. Now, another interesting point of your background is you're an attorney by training.
Hmm.
Talk about that a little bit. What drew you to law? So you saw this family business around you. You're going into college. I think you went to Boston, right? So tell me a little bit about what drew you to the law.
I'm sorry,
What
what?
drew you to law, to
Oh,
that track?
I was in college. I went to Cornell and I took a wonderful course on, I think it was like civil liberties. And it just
Hmm.
really turned me on. Really was the professor, even
Okay.
more than the course. And I said, I was going to graduate. I guess it was my senior year. And I
Hmm.
had, frankly, Ed, I had no idea what to do. I
Hmm.
really didn't know. I knew I liked legal type stuff and this
Hmm.
course. And I had one of these but not come to Jesus, but where you sit with someone and the
Sure.
professor said, look into this. And I started looking into it. I took the LSAT or something, did
Hmm.
okay, applied to law school. And then from there, it met my intellectual needs.
Hmm.
It met I wanted to help people. It
Hmm.
was able to, I wanted to do some good in the world by being able to reach out and give back to people. So that's what I did.
Okay.
And did that
Nice.
for a number of years. And what really turned everything for me was I'm going down this road as an attorney, and my dad comes to me unexpectedly and says he was in his 50s and said, Mark, you don't really know much about this business, but you might want to take a look at it because if you don't, I'm going to sell it. And that just hit me as wow, that hit me between the eyes of that's just nuts. I mean, I didn't know I knew enough, but I said, nah, it doesn't seem like I should just pass that by. So, what was I going to say? It, it it just gave me the desire to say, don't sell it. Let me come down. And actually, what I did is I had some old time clients, which I took
Mhm.
with me as a backup when I
Okay.
started at O.Berk, because when you're in a family business and we don't have because it's just my sister and I who are owners of the business. Unlike larger family businesses, we don't have a family constitution. We don't have
Mhm.
any of those things that you're supposed to do in a family business. But since it was just two of us, it really wasn't an issue.
Okay. Okay. So that was, and I laughed a little bit because Mark, that is the exact experience that I had.
Really?
Come in and check this out or I'm selling it. That's what my
Yeah.
dad said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, how do you pass that up? And you just feel like you got to go for it. So so you officially joined, it was around what, 1981? Was
Yep.
that your,
Exactly
okay.
right.
Okay. Okay. And was it just you and your dad in terms of family members? You mentioned your sister. Was she playing a role in the business at that time?
No, actually, before that, when I was in, I guess I was in college or something, my sister actually, after graduating college, went to work at O.Berk. She went to
Okay.
work in supply chain.
Hmm.
And then she met her husband and they moved to Connecticut. She moved on and started her family. Then I came in 81 and it was really just me. My sister's on the board and she's an advisor with us, but she doesn't have any daily responsibilities. But we're really open about stuff like this. We're very transparent. I'll try to do that because one of the things that I think is really good about a family business is trying to instill in your all of your customers and in your employees that you're something different than a large mega company that has all kinds of rules.
Sure.
We still try to do, we really encourage visits to customers. And since COVID, as you may know
Yeah.
yourself, it's really difficult to get in to see certain customers now because they
Yeah.
just everyone has moved to virtual.
Yeah.
And yet, I still think that it's one of the things that we do a lot, and I think it's a differentiator.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention, and I really try to pay attention to my people. We just try to do the best that we can because, as I'm sure we all say this, it's a whatever. Your people are your greatest asset.
Absolutely.
There's no question about it. I have some really longtime employees with me, and we have a lot of new people too, because
Hmm.
COVID was very disrupting to us, as I guess it was
Sure.
to many businesses.
Absolutely.
Since we don't actually own manufacturing plants, right, and we're a distributor and we do contract manufacturing, boy, supply chain really got screwed up in COVID.
I bet. I bet. Yeah.
Made things a lot more difficult.
Yeah. But you navigated through and here you are standing strong. And if I could go back to those early years. So you and your dad had that heart to heart. You said, okay, coming in. Was there ever like a moment of doubt, Mark, where you're like, gosh, did I make the right call here? And if so, just tell me a little bit about that. Or did it just does it feel natural?
Oh, it took me a while to adjust.
Okay.
Not so
Okay.
much to the business, Ed, but you can relate to this too. Working with your dad,
Yeah.
working with a family member is a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. My dad was a very, I don't want to say he was uptight, but he was a real very controlling kind of guy. And
Okay.
when he started, when he was younger, the business, it was such a size that he could really basically know everything.
Hmm.
Be in charge, not in charge, but view everything that was going on. As you grow, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it was very difficult for him to learn to delegate. And it was also
Hmm.
difficult, I think, for him to trust me. Because one of the things about, as you said, I'm fourth generation is, but you never know if the next generation is competent. It
Hmm.
isn't just that you're a family member. You have to be a family member. You might have to want to come into the business, and you still have to be competent. You have to know what you can do. You may want it, but you may not be qualified for this job. I mean, we've been quite lucky that, thank goodness, it took me a while, but I learned the business.
Hmm.
And when I started, you talk about doubt, I didn't know. I just knew it was time to move on from where I was. I didn't particularly
Okay.
like the kind of law that I was practicing. And there's just something about family. When your dad says, as you said, I'm going to sell it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Wait, that just seems to come out of nowhere. So we're not going to do that. Plus, my view of my business, and this is something I always believe myself, is I've always looked at my role running this business as a stewardship.
Hmm.
Okay. I've always looked at it since we're an old business. Started in 1910. I want things to keep going forward. So
Yeah,
when I do that, I think of my family, I think of my employees, but I just really believe that as a steward of this, it's my job to, as it moved to me, to move it to another generation.
nice, nice. So you got through that moment of doubt. You figured out a way to work with dad. So talk a little bit about the transition, because this is something that a lot of listeners are interested to is how do you go from coming on board to eventually taking a leadership role? And tell me a little bit of when was the timing? Like, how did that interaction happen with you and your dad?
Ah, boy. It was difficult, Ed,
Yeah,
because I joined a business there really wasn't a job for me per se. It wasn't like I interviewed for a sales position or
right.
management. It was like you're coming into the business as the boss's son. That's a tough position to be in
Yes.
for employees because they don't know what you're doing. They don't know how much responsibility you have. And quite frankly, my dad was difficult that way. He didn't really know we didn't really have a plan. We should have
Right.
planned better. But frankly, I didn't know enough to make a plan because I didn't really know how the business operated. And he
Yeah.
wasn't a great delegator. So how
Okay.
did we do it? Fits and starts.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
found areas of the business that I enjoyed. I like getting into sales. I like getting into purchasing. And yeah, I just had to play it by ear. You know
Yeah.
what helped a lot? Going out with salespeople.
Okay.
We're a sales organization. So going to see your customers, going to see what they need, and just trying to develop what the hell do we do in this business? What do
Yeah.
we really do?
Yeah.
And on top of that, we're in a rapidly changing technological world in terms of our specialty, which is rigid packaging. In terms of the diversity, supply chain, when I started, I think we were about 100% or 90%. Our supply chain was domestic.
Hmm.
But over the years, that's completely changed because especially things like glass bottles and things that I need to buy, I can't get them in the States, or I can't get them in the States at a reasonable enough price.
Sure.
And it's always amazed me that I can go to China or some offshore Asian producer and buy things and bring them from Asia to New Jersey for less than getting them here.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing to me. So I've never quite understood that. We used to buy a lot of glass bottles from Wheaton Glass,
Hmm.
which was in Millville, New Jersey.
Sure.
Very old company also. I could bring glass bottles in from China cheaper than I could buy them in Millville, New Jersey. And I'm in New Jersey. I could send my truck
Yes.
down and pick it up. I've never been able to figure that out, Ed. Business is crazy, but these are the kind of crazy things you have to adjust to. And in terms of our culture, it took a while because
Yeah.
we were so ingrained. Remember, when you're an older company, that's wonderful. You have great traditions, but you can get stayed. You can get frozen because you're just used
Absolutely.
to doing things the way they've always been done, especially with long-term employees who are wonderfully loyal and you love them and they're happy. But people don't really want to change. Change is challenging. I
Yes, it
find it
is.
myself. Bet you do too.
Yes, I
We're in a
do.
world where change, business, relationships, they just rapidly changing. So
So,
I've always said that the most important characteristic that we can do in the business at least in my business, is adaptability.
mhm,
Okay. That and persistence.
yeah, for sure.
Those are really important values that we do. I've always preached to, to salespeople. I don't mean to get too much off the topic, but I say to salespeople, when the customer says we're not interested or you don't have it right, to me, you don't walk away. You got to go back.
Yeah,
You're in sales, you're in
yeah,
branding. You
yeah.
don't get the orders right away. It takes a
No,
lot of work and dedication to get in.
yeah.
And
No
that's one of the
means
things that we'd like to preach. Just
no,
keep going back.
absolutely. A lot of times, no means not right now, right? As you were starting to get that orientation, right? You were going out with salespeople, you were understanding purchasing, you were looking at different facets of the business, looking at all the different pieces. How did the staff at that time regard you? What did they think of,
Oh,
okay, here comes Mr. Galen's son is now in the building. How, talk a little bit about that. Was there any pushback? Was there any pressures there, or did they welcome you in? Talk about that for a moment.
confusion. Probably the first word that pops into my mind. Here's the boss's son. I actually, as a lawyer, this actually fits into what we said earlier. I
Okay.
came in as general counsel to the company.
Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense.
Made
There you
sense.
go. Yeah.
But at the time, we didn't have much legal work to do. We're a small business. Unlike today, many of our customers, we all have to sign NDAs for everything, right?
Sure.
Before we never had that. Probably didn't know what that was at the time. Okay. They didn't know. And I had to find my own path through this, and employees didn't know really what to do with me. So I really, and it's a quick funny story. When I started, we were in Linden, a warehouse office. So I get hired, I move in. There's no office for me. There's no space. So I'm in the conference room.
Yeah.
I took a little side thing in the corner of the conference room and I set my desk up. We 3 years later we moved to our current location, a new building, a different
Okay.
building, I should say. But boy, that must have confused everybody because I'd be sitting there at my desk and people would come in and have meetings in this conference room, and either I would leave or join, but it was awkward because no, we really didn't, we'd never done this before, and we really didn't sit and think, how do we introduce this to employees? What's going to be the reaction? What do we have to do? It was just a kind of a daily thing. I learned to
Yeah.
pick up things. It was hard. Did I
Okay.
get pushback? I didn't really get so much pushback as maybe, as I said, just confusion. Difficult when you change generations, okay?
Yes.
Because my dad had been there many years also. Now we're working together. And here's the thing. What when you have conflict? Conflict resolution. This is a big deal. My dad and I used to
Yes.
disagree on certain things, okay?
Okay.
How we're going to sell something, what are we going to buy? Just typical business questions. How do you resolve that? It was interesting because some of it I should learn. I should be making those decisions. Some he knew better than me, and I probably should have I did sit back and learn,
Hmm.
but not easy. If I had known what I know now, I probably would have done some more research on family business. There are lots of courses you can take on how you run a family business and the ins and outs of it. Since I've joined many years ago, I took some of those courses myself as
Yeah.
continuing education. But at the time, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a plan for a family business. I just
Sure.
got a job, moved in, and tried to pick it up.
Yeah.
Was it great? Not particularly. Did it work? Yeah,
Yeah.
eventually it worked, but it was a
But
challenge.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that point up, Mark, because I think a lot of things that, in terms of the stories that I've heard in the voices from family business, one of the things that they really struggle with is this idea of you've got family and you've got business, and now they're commingled. Did you and your dad say have a way of like, how did you divide the two so that they weren't spilling into each other? So you're not sitting down at a family gathering and suddenly you're talking about O.Berk. So did you have any ways of keeping the two a little bit separate when they had to, or how did you manage that?
This is a very good question. The person that got the worst of it was my mom
Uh,
because my sister, remember, years before had worked in the business. I was working in the business. My dad was running the business. Mom was a typical mom, right? She wasn't in the business. And so the rest of us are sitting at dinner talking. And as you said, it's very difficult to differentiate and dissect your personal life and your business life when it's all wrapped up in a family. Okay.
yeah,
And as it's very challenging. We've been
yeah,
very lucky that I'm fourth generation, but boy, you get really lucky. You work really hard and you just hope you can keep this thing going. The
yeah.
good thing is that the business, the industry that we're in, okay, of rigid packaging is a large and growing business. It always has been. We're in many different market segments.
Mhm.
So hopefully if one goes down, one goes up. Again, our business, like many businesses, our business rises and falls with the tides of business.
Absolutely. So mom was something of the peacekeeper, if you will, like
Yeah,
whenever there was a, or at
mom was
least a
like,
good listener.
yes, can we stop talking about this now and talk about something else?
So I get the sense a couple of things. One, I think at your core, family values are very important, so much so that when it was on the table to maybe let the family business go, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, can't let that happen. But
Right.
also, I sense that most certainly you and your father had different strengths, right? Um,
Absolutely.
but if you look back on your dad, what are some of the things that you said, wow, these are great characteristics of him that you admire that you maybe bring forward,
Yeah,
as
that's a
fourth?
good question too. My dad always had a philosophy, which I still believe to this day, and it was simple. He would say, a little bit extra. He
A
would
little bit
always say
extra.
that in business, do a little bit more. Just do a little bit extra. And I knew what he meant by that because when in a business, when you're negotiating with a customer or trying to develop things, it's very easy to get distracted. And as we just got to keep going back, do a little bit more. And that to me was the kind of thing about a family business. We're not just a transactional occurrence where
Mhm.
you want to develop a relationship with you. Because remember, as in branding, we're handling people's brands,
Yeah.
which are the most valuable thing to companies. They can't do it wrong, right? So the bottle they put it in has got to be right. People get very close to this, and we
Mhm.
do too. And we wanted to show them it isn't just a transactional, like where do we ship these X? We wanted to help you develop your brand, help give you options. And as the business grew and as the industry grew with new items that came into the market, more pumps, airless technologies, more kinds of tubes, all different things that as the industry grew, we had to learn to adapt to go with that. But the thing
Mhm.
really, I think that was my thing. Just keep doing a little bit extra. My dad was a very ethical person. We just always tried to do what was right. And you know what? We always tried to give the customer or our employees the benefit of the doubt on stuff. Take a second look, see what you can do. Doesn't always work, right?
Yeah.
Things don't always go the way you plan. But that's why I say about
Yeah.
persistence.
And when you do a little more, keep doing a little more, those are little victories that you're winning every day, and eventually they add up to a big victory. So that's awesome. That's awesome. The now one of the things you said, Mark, that was really important was this idea of businesses that and the potential of getting stale as they move from one generation to the next. So now let's look to the future a little bit. What are some things that you're doing right now to ensure the continuing evolution of O.Berk Company as you look to the future?
Oh boy. Wow. Okay. It's what I look to every day, Ed.
Okay.
Besides the daily transactional work that you have to do with everything.
Hmm.
What do I try to do? We're trying to update all our processes and systems so
Okay.
that they're just easier to deal with. Okay. One of it is IT.
Hmm.
Okay. And these are just process things. To grow your business and so it doesn't get stale, you have to stay on the cutting edge of kind of IT and computers. In terms of people, I have two sons,
Hmm.
okay, who are now in graduate school. One is going to be a doctor and one is going to be a lawyer. So
Okay.
I'm a very proud dad. Um,
Congratulations.
I don't know if they're going to be. I've always said to my sons, as was said to me, if you'd like to come in, please come in. I'd love to
Hmm.
have you work here, but don't take any pressure. You have your own
Hmm.
lives. I respect you. My expectations are that you do what's best for your life. We'll talk together. And if you don't want to come in management, that's okay. There's a lot of good people that they'll be owners of it, partial owners of it, and there'll be a board. And I've tried to set it up with good advisors like
Hmm.
you, people that can give you advice for stuff that you don't know
Yeah.
and get that on the right track. So I think that's the way to do it.
So the future is still open. If they
Yes, the
want the
future is
opportunity,
still.
it's there for them. And if they don't,
Mhm.
you've made your peace with that as well. So that's
Absolutely.
great. That's great. As we're wrapping up, just a couple of other questions. For somebody that's maybe at the beginning of this journey where you were, where I was, at 22, and you were probably right around there,
Yeah.
and they're at that crossroads and they're thinking about it. So what's a piece of advice you might give to somebody who's contemplating that, a young person who's thinking about, yeah, should I join the family business? Should I go, my own way? What's something you might impart to them based on your experience?
Let's start from first of all, I would have spent more time researching what it means to join a family business.
Okay.
There's lots of kind of academic things. Business has been studied well, and there's lots of advice. I didn't know that at the time. Okay, so what I would tell people first would be to learn about the nature of a family business, how they run. As I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier before, many family businesses have many people, many people, and they have family constitutions and they have rules and all kinds of things. We haven't had to go down that road, but I would think about something like that. I would say, and I'd also say, think about how that's going to impact your family, potentially,
Hmm.
your wife, your kids, your parents, your cousins, depending how large it is, there's tremendous amount of family dynamics that always go into the business beyond the transactional part of what you're doing because you have all the overlay of all the emotions of a family. So I'd
Hmm.
say you know what? If I was smart, I probably would have gone down there and spent a week or two really just learning
Yeah.
what he did hour to hour, just to see, get a flavor of it. Because before that, I would just visit.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that safe to say that's the same advice if you were to go back in time and give younger Mark a piece of advice? Would that probably be it? Say, hey,
Yeah, yeah,
get a
yeah,
better orientation, learn a few things, understand what you're getting into more fully, and then make
exactly.
a decision. Okay.
Yeah.
But you just jumped in, as I did. So what kept you going, Mark? What kept you from staying the course? Where probably there were a few times where you could have said that, hey, is this right? Is this not right? What was the thing that kind of kept you engaged across some of those challenging times and challenging conversations and conflict and all that?
I just believed it would work.
Okay.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
As I said to you, I look at it as a stewardship. This was family. I'm sure I didn't want to disappoint my parents, honestly. I wanted to be a success. I'm working. I guess I wanted to show my dad that I could
Yeah.
succeed and we could work together as best that we could. It's tough. Another thing I would have done, Ed, is I would have spent more time. And as a lawyer, I did a lot of this conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
How do you sit down as a family and as a business person and resolve
Mm-hmm.
conflicts that come up, like you said? I didn't really have a lot of those skills. It's also very difficult when when your boss is your dad.
Yes.
These are two intertwined things that are very difficult to untwine. And when I said we didn't really have a plan, when you jump in like you and I did, you just learn
Yeah.
on the fly. But it worked because I had the time. And during times of conflict, I just figured, you know what? It's just a challenge. It'll something good will come around to it, and it always has. Not me. It was probably never the way I expected it would be because that's just the way business is.
Yeah.
But it always worked.
Yeah.
I just, you know what? Stay the course. I just stay the course.
And the course, if you look at O.Berk and the look at the growth of the company just across your stewardship alone, it's remarkable. You've truly taken the company to new levels and to new heights that maybe your dad never even imagined possible. I don't know, but certainly you've definitely left a mark in terms of from a company standpoint. Talking about that final question before we wrap up, if you were to look back and you're done, whatever that day is, Mark, where you say, okay,
Yeah.
I've had enough of O.Berk. What is the legacy you hope to leave behind? What do you hope to kind
Ooh,
of,
that's a wonderful
people say,
question.
okay, under Mark's tenure, fourth generation, here's what people remember most.
Wow. I like to say that I hoped we were a better supplier and partner to our customers. I think I've tried to set the business up such that, as I said, the processes and things work easily. And if I move on, there's a system, there's
Mm-hmm.
people in place, and there's a way to get people. I've also tried, because my style is different than my dad is, I've decentralized and delegated to different people much more than my dad did. But as I said at the beginning, it was such a smaller business. It was very different in terms of what my dad's responsibilities had to be. I have the luxury of having more people and being able to develop their skills separately. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. Get good people in that have good skill sets, know our industry well, and be able to move forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Great.
Mm.
So last thing I'll ask is if somebody's out there and they happen to be listening and they happen to have a need for consumer packaging, what's the best way for them to get in touch with O.Berk Company?
Wow. You can go to our
Website? Okay.
O.Berk
O.Berk.com, right? Okay.
O.Berk.com and
Okay.
bottlestore.com, which is
Bottlestore.com.
our not B2B, but B2C
Yep.
business that we have. I would say that.
Okay.
Just go to the
Great.
website.
Great.
We have phone numbers and contacts, and we're more than happy to talk to all of your wonderful listeners.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. This was terrific. Again, I'm here with Marc Gaelen, CEO and fourth generation of O.Berk Company. I'm your host, Ed Delia, and you've been listening to Growing Up B2B. Thanks so much, everyone. Take
Thank you,
care.
Ed.
Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.